when you get that, and you get people unconstrained by working in arts or technology or whatever it might be, and you get these crossovers, you get the emergence of topics like digital humanities, you know, which is digital and humanities, put the two together. There's wonderful opportunities for innovation and doing things which had not been thought of before. You take mathematics and food science, which is, you know, those kind of crossovers.
I do think, though, that even though those opportunities are there, that we're actually not leveraging them in any way that like we could. So all of the centres that exist, they are interdisciplinary, but I would argue that they're interdisciplinary in kind of expected ways in the main. Yeah. So, you know, you have a mix of physicists and engineers and mathematicians and computer scientists, and you have different classes of those. But the funding structures in Ireland don't lend themselves. So, for example, if you decided it was really important to bring economists or social scientists or artists into the mix, there actually is there's no formal way that you do that. Yeah. So you either do it around the fringes, you kind of are hope that something happens. And I think we're still paying a little bit of lip service to that because you just actually, I remember a couple of years ago submitting a proposal to a body I won't name, but half of it was in economics and half of it was in science, and when I got the review it said, we just reviewed half of this because the other half isn't relevant to us, so of course I got half marks in the proposal. But I think it's a typical example of the structures don't exist. So I agree that and I think Ireland is the size of a country that we should really be able to bring these things together more easily, but I think we still have very traditional structures in terms of the funding. When it comes to somebody spinning out a company or something like that, all these things mix more, but certainly at the science side.
Would you say that those collaborations that we have in our structured programs are safe collaborations, they're predictable collaborations, not just with engineers and computer scientists and those, but the applications to areas?
I wouldn't say that necessarily. I do think, no, I wouldn't say that. I think there's a lot of risk being taken across them, but it is risking within a slightly more homogeneous area than Anne was asking about, yeah.
Okay, but there's no wild risks like anthropology and data analytics or telecommunications and agriculture.
It's like, I was having this discussion with somebody about funding agencies in the US, and if you think they have something like SFI, which is called the National Science Foundation, and they've also got DARPA, which would come from the more military side, and they say that, you know, NSF does really solid incremental science, and then DARPA gets it all wrong or gets it all right. So I think you always, when you have a science body building on reputation, it is about that kind of, there is an incremental thing that happens because you build on your reputation. So you're right from that perspective. And we don't possibly have, we don't have organisations that look at really wild ideas, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
What do you think, Brian, you know, when you've been looking at those areas, what do you think that there is anything that can be done, or is that something that naturally happens around the fringes? You know, the way we talk about innovation coming out of almost that gap between resources and an idea?
Well, it's certainly one of the key areas that can happen. We can catalyse some of it by creating convergence fora where you have these different disciplines and you have these unusual partnerships coming together. I had a very interesting discussion yesterday with one of Ireland's leading geriatricians, Des O'Neill. He writes the column in the Irish Times on this. And so there's an expert talking about the key issues around ageing. As you know, it's one of the key opportunities for Ireland to look at the services, technologies, products that one can develop and innovate around that massively growing global issue. But he has such an interesting perspective, and he brings artists and the creative arts into that space in terms of the therapeutic fronts. And if you could start to look at that, how you would embed that in technologies, how you would link that into the Internet of Things, then, you know, innovations, jobs, profit can be created, but ultimately individuals benefit. So I think the more we can create fora which brings these disparate views and perspectives and disparate expertise together, the more likely you are going to get this serendipitous, innovative event. But it's a statistical issue, really, but by creating the fora, it can happen. You see it in the hackathons as well, and you see it compressed into a weekend. I think it's usually impressive when you see these different individuals talking about a problem. The problem itself can morph over the weekend, but you see what can, you know, from an idea and a problem to a prototype working solution can happen in 48 hours. And I think if we can start or continue to expand those sort of fora and convergence events and mainstream them into the system, the more innovation we're likely to see happening.
Okay. I have other questions, but I just want to bring the floor in if there's any questions out there.
Good morning, Marion Palmer, IADT. I'm very interested in your conversation there about the safeness of innovation, because where my institution is, we're looking at computing, coding, multimedia, working with designers, model makers, at that sort of interaction and costs. But it's actually quite difficult for an organisation of us to get funding. Now, we're doing quite well, but it's actually, in terms of, Alan, your research and funding of people, it's much more difficult, as Linda said, to get that collaboration. And when we see our graphic designers working with the insight centres, which are in UCD and DCU, and seeing how they are making data analytics that you were talking about, Nora, so useful, and getting spin-out companies, that really is that sort of area that needs, in a sense, more institutional funding or more thing to build on all the work that's going on. So I just want to echo and support that particular argument.